Welcome to the third annual Monadnock International Film Festival. My name is Phil Smith, and this is the Radar Marketing Glass and Gear interviews, and our guest is Margaret Nagle, screenwriter for The Good Lie. Welcome, Margaret.
Hi.
Thank you for being here. Tell us a little bit about this movie. This movie is going to be tonight at the festival. It's the closing movie. We're all excited about seeing this movie. Tell us a little bit about what the movie is, and then I want to talk about the process of how you got into actually developing this movie.
Well, the movie is about a group of kids, and it starts early in their lives. They're, 7, 8, 9, in their village in South Sudan. And it takes place in the late 80s when there was a civil war broke out again in South Sudan. It wasn't South Sudan, it was all Sudan. It was one country then. And the North and South Sudan have been at civil war for 60 years. It's the longest civil war in modern history. So they come in and carpet bomb their village, and it so happens that the boys are off in this particular village in the Sudanese culture. They guard cattle. The kids are sent off. Cattle is money. Cattle is everything to their villages. And so these boys escape this incredible death and destruction because they're off watching their cattle. And they escape their village intact, and they meet up with other boys from other villages. And it's about the incredible lost boys of Sudan who walked in a group of 20,000 boys thousands of miles through the sub-Saharan desert to Ethiopia to try and reach safety, and then they were bombed there, and they had to walk back through Sudan to Kenya, where they then lived in a refugee camp for 10 years. And were brought to the United States in the largest resettlement program of its kind that the United States had ever done. So the movie follows a group of boys who come together in a group as survivors and build their own family, and a sister, a lost girl. There are only 8 or 9 lost girls. And it's their story from childhood to adulthood.
So what time does it take place that they brought them over to the U.S., that the project
They
was
brought them, this particular group in this film come over in 2000, 2001, and right before 9/11.
Oh, wow.
Because 9/11 shut the program down.
So the program is no...
It's no longer.
Yeah.
And there's now 250,000 people in that refugee camp that they lived in Kenya, Kakuma, waiting for a chance to go somewhere.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when this happened and they were guarding the cattle, they came back to their village and realized their families had been wiped out?
They knew the villages were set away from the cattle camps were set away from the villages, so they knew that they could see the planes, they could see helicopters, they could hear everything going on. And so when the fighting stopped, they went back to their villages and saw that their families had been killed, and our lost girl in the film, she was actually playing dead. And so they find her, and they're able to pull her out. And that's why most of the lost girls were girls that were smart enough to play dead.
Now, is that part of the fictitious part of the story, or is that part
well,
of the...
what I did was, in creating the story, is I looked at articles from all over the world. It's an original story that I created using a massive database, all the newspaper articles in every language I had translated. I looked at everything possible about the genocide in South Sudan, the ongoing civil war, what was happening to the survivors there, and then I put together my own original story. And then what we did was, with the producers, we created a scholarship fund for all the lost boys and girls, there are 4,000, who've come to the United States for their education or for their charitable needs. A lot of them now have their own charities and foundations that they've set up since they've moved here.
And did is it assimilating to the U.S.? Did they have, language issues, that type of thing, or did they speak English?
Well, they're actually the South Sudan has those 3 tribes there have a great facility with language. Sudan was under English rule and French rule, and plus there's various dialects amongst the camps. So they're actually, a lot of the lost boys and girls have actually gone to work for the government. The U.S. government, who've come here because they're so gifted with language. So they spoke the King's English, which had been taught in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s by the English who were colonizing in South Sudan. So they speak actually a very beautiful kind of English that's a very formalized English, and they have a very elaborate vocabulary that when they were in the refugee camp, there were only 10 or 12 books for the entire camp. And the South Sudanese culture feel education is their mother and their father. It will speak for them as their parents cannot. And so they're very committed to studying. So in the refugee camp, they memorized these books, every word, and they would share them amongst the camps. So there was a book on basketball. There was a book on flower arranging. There was a book on U.S. history. And some of the books were very old, but they memorized the St. James Bible. So they're poets.
So how many of these, sidetracking from your movie for a second, but how many of the people that actually came over got careers in things that had to do with those books, those 12 books?
That's a really interesting question. I don't know, but I think that many of them, they're very good at putting things together too. They have a real visual building sense. So a lot of the Lost Boys have become engineers. In fact, our financing for the film came from a man in Memphis, Tennessee, who adopted a lost boy at his church, put him through undergrad engineering school, and his adopted son now has his PhD in engineering and works for his company.
So let's talk about the movie process, and this movie stars Reese Witherspoon.
Yes.
And
well, it actually doesn't star Reese Witherspoon. She is the name, she's the face on the poster, but it really stars these 4 actors, and it's a little bit of a misrepresentation but it's marketing and it's movies,
right,
and it's how you get financing. In a lot of critics were pretty hard on the marketing of the film, but and I too was frustrated with the marketing of the film, but when I wish critics and people who wrote about film realized that to make a film that has to do with Africa and to get financing from Northern America or from Europe in distribution, there's not a lot of support for that, which is why it took 10 years to even get this movie made.
That's what I wanted to talk to you about.
Reese is a co-star in the movie, and she's incredible. She doesn't come on for like 35 minutes. It's really the story of these 4 kids, and they're growing up, and she is a supporting role, and she's amazing in the film, but she's not the star of the film.
So the process of getting this made took you 10 years?
10 years.
10 years. And you had a lot of hurdles. Some things happen that were just out of the blue?
Out of the blue. The first thing that happened was our producer, who was so committed, Robert Newmeyer, he produced Sex, Lies, and Videotape, Training Day, the Santa Claus movies. He's a great, great Hollywood producer in that knew everybody, understood, could work with all levels of directors and budgets. He died of a heart attack when he was 49. And so we were 2.5, 3 years into the process, and we were in pre-production. We had it all budgeted. We had everything worked out. And when he died, at the studio we were at, which was Paramount.
It was Paramount.
It was Paramount. They put it into turnaround, and Paramount had undergone Sherry Lansing, Donald DeLine, Gail Berman, and then Brad Gray. So there were 4 heads of the studio just in the time that I was working on the movie. So the movie it was like, this week you're in, this week you're out. This week it's good, this week it's not so good. No one wants to make this film. Everybody loves this film, And the script, when the very first, there's a thing in LA called the Blacklist, not the Hollywood 10 Blacklist, but about like screenplays that are notable. And the very first Blacklist had this script, which was called The Lost Boys of the Sudan at that time. Prominent. It was a script that it was my first hired job as a screenwriter. So, and it got, everybody in town read the script, loved the script, was very moved by the script. It has a really great structure. So when he died, Paramount put it in turnaround, and they would not let it out. They made a policy. What happened is they let Twilight out in turnaround. And they made an internal decision, as I'm told, and they, you can quote me, but don't quote me, it was, we're not letting, after that, things aren't going to come out and turn around.
So you have to wait for certain clauses to expire, that type of thing, before you can
Well,
do something
technically, if it would never expire. What happened is the Writers Guild of America has a little-known rule called the Writers Reacquisition Rule, which says 5 years after your last paid step on a script, if no other writer has written on the script, and if the script is not an adaptation of a book, or a magazine article, you can go back in and petition legally to get your script back, and you get it for an 18-month free option to try and resell it. So you take it out of Paramount's hands for free.
That's an amazing clause. I've never
right,
heard of that.
No one knows it exists.
Reclaiming.
You reclaim your material.
As long as all the things line up properly.
Yeah. You know, and so, but I had to be really quiet about the fact that I was going to do that, because Paramount could put, in the 5 years, have put another writer on for $1.
And change a word.
And that would disqualify my being able to get the script back.
Wow.
So I would just, on all my meetings as a writer for work, would be like, oh, that's so bad. Oh, it's so bad about that script. What are you going to do? I said, well, that's just what happens. Always knowing in the back of my mind, my lawyer and I were like just marking off the days on the calendar going, we're going to get this back. So we sent over a letter to Paramount saying the rights revert to me for 18 months. And there was nothing, and they were like, what clause? You know, because it is, no one knows the clause exists, but it's hard and fast, and I had the Writers Guild of America.
So you get the script back.
Yes.
And then what do you do?
No one wanted it, because they all went, no one wants to make a movie about Africa. No one that takes place there, it's too scary. Yeah. And Ron Howard and Brian Grazer and Karen Cahala Sherwood, who at Imagine were starting this program where they wanted to put Ron Howard, because he's worked in film and television, which I have too, has always wanted to make a TV writer's room for writing film. He's always wanted to do this, and this has been a long goal of his, because the development process for movies is so drawn out.
So when you say that, sorry to interrupt you, when you're saying TV writer room, a lot of TV shows have like 5-6 writers.
Yes.
And you put them in a room, and you start putting stuff up on the board and,
right.
and that type of thing. He wants to do that with film.
Right.
He wants to have 6 people in a room, whatever, start putting stuff on a board on index cards and that type of thing.
And help each other out, because the writing process for movies is so solitary. You get your notes from the studio, and then you go off and you have 12 weeks and you're all by yourself. Yeah. And if you don't understand the notes, who do you have to talk to? And the development executive that you're working with, for someone like Ron Howard, you don't want to call them up and go, I don't understand, because they go, you're fired. Like it's pretty brutal in movies how screenwriters are treated. They're pretty, it's not pretty. Yeah. So he was like, what if screenwriters, when they got those notes, had a group of writers they could work with and talk to and really work these things through and try different avenues and be. So they had said, would you want to do this room? I'd just been working on Boardwalk Empire, and they said, you'd be great in this room because you write features and work in a TV writer's room. And I was like, I'm completely sold. And they were like, well, what do you want to write? And I said, well, I have the script, The Lost Boys of the Sudan, and I have it on this option, and I feel like, because I had 4 studio heads, I did so many different drafts for it. Would I be able to bring? So they read it and they go, we love this. Come back in. You can just make this go back to what you wanted the script to initially be. And then be in the room, because they needed someone who was experienced in a writer's room, which I am. So I joined that program, and that was being financed by an Indian company, Reliance. And so they were going to finance the movie. The goal was to make the movies in the writer's room. So at the end of 12 months working on the script and getting it to a great place, Reliance said, we're out of the movie business. We don't want to invest in movies anymore. This is such a, and they had invested in a lot of other movies that weren't what they liked. And so they yanked it. So I had this script. I now had Ron and Brian on as producers, but they were like, they're not going to make the movie. We're not going to make the movie. Yeah. We just lost the money. We're changing our deal at Universal. Universal doesn't want to make this. This is a Universal movie. Yeah. So I was stuck again. And I had 6 months to go, tick on the option. And then I kept thinking, oh, the people that made The Blind Side, not that this is The Blind Side, it's not, but because I kept saying, we've got to go through the list, and I've got to go just do a million meetings with this script and get all new producers to read it who have actual financing. Yeah. And those people had money. So I went in to go meet with them, and they go, oh, wow, we loved your script about Eleanor Roosevelt and Lorena Hickok. And I was like, that's not the script. That's another script. Oh, my God. And you really only get one read at a company. You don't get... It's not like you go, no, there's this script. It's about the Lost Boys of Sudan. And
put that on for a second while I show you this one.
They start glazing over, and I'm like... So I had a great meeting, and I said, could I send you the script anyway? And they're like, yeah, but, we're going to think about you. We've got some historic TV miniseries we were going to think about. I was like, okay, fine. So, and then I get a call. The development executive, the reader at this company, was also working for this woman, Molly Smith.
Okay.
And Molly Smith's father is who adopted the Lost Boy. And Molly Smith's dad is Fred Smith, who's the president of FedEx. The president of FedEx, Fred Smith, adopted a Lost Boy, Joseph Deng. And Molly put money into The Blind Side. And Molly read the script, and she went, "This is a movie about my brother. I'm sending it to my dad."
So you're getting financing from FedEx.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
FedEx. So they came in, and Warner Brothers did the distribution, but they didn't home grow the movie, which is always, it's hard when that's always another wrinkle. So anyway, so the film, it was 18 months. It was.
Where did you shoot the film?
We shot it in Atlanta, in South Africa, and Kenya, and at the refugee camp Kakuma, and in Nairobi in Kenya. So we shot it for a very small budget, and we had to get Reese or someone of that level to play the supporting role. And luckily, Reese wanted to do it, and so we were able to get our Lionsgate is doing the international. It's just opening internationally. It's open a couple places, but now it's going wider internationally. So that's how the film. So it was truly the 18. We were like joking. It was the last day of the 18 months that I got a check into Paramount. Molly Smith she called me, she goes, "Well, you could write the check and I'll just pay you back." And I'm like, "No, I don't have that much in my checking account." Because it was also the development costs of the script when it had been at Paramount for the couple of years. So she got a cashier's check in at like 5:30. And we were like, "There's traffic." We're like, "It's LA, we're trying to get this into the legal department," because we would literally lose the chance to make the film. Paramount could say no.
It's kind of amazing that the parallels of the fact that these Lost Boys are doing this long, incredible, challenging journey in their life, and you guys have the same long, incredibly challenging journey in getting the movie made.
It was brutal, and it was heartbreaking because I always felt that this movie could shine a light on a situation that is ongoing, and that we could do a lot for the story of Sudan. We could do a lot for the world of immigration within the United States of America. All those kids sitting on the border in Central, we have such a lot of immigration issues that our country needs to reevaluate, and that I felt that this film, if seen by the right people, could open up that conversation again. And luckily, the film is opening up that conversation in D.C. again, and people are watching it in all the committees and Senate subcommittees, and John McCain. We've had everybody there has been watching the film.
Beautiful.
And so it's working. It's working. And UNICEF, we have a fund called the Good Life Fund, which is run by UNICEF, and we've raised, I don't know the number today, it's well over $500,000 for humanitarian aid on the ground in South Sudan. And then we have other charities that are like Oxfam, and I'm going to Ireland on Monday to work with this group called Concern that does humanitarian aid from Ireland for South Sudan, and we're doing screenings this Thursday night in 14 theaters all through Ireland, and doing this big fundraiser through the country.
Wow.
And so it's exciting. So we're and it's interesting. Europe is very open to Africa because so many Africans have successfully immigrated to England, to Scotland, and UK. They're doing very well there. Spain, Italy. There are a lot of places that have been taking lost boys and girls since we stopped taking them.
I see. So tell me about some of the actors that are in the. You say some of them are actual Lost Boys.
Yeah, all four of the leads are real life refugees of war in Sudan.
And how did that come about? I mean, did you audition them still, or was it a process of this guy is perfect for the part even though he's never acted before or something?
Our director Philippe Falardeau and the casting director Mindy Marin, we put out open calls in the Sudanese communities all over the country. And they went from Kansas City to Fargo to Atlanta, San Diego, Phoenix, and auditioned Lost Boys. And all the children in the film are played by the children of Lost Boys and Girls.
Very
So
nice.
they're acting their parents' story.
Yeah.
And so their parents came with them to South Africa and to the refugee camp, and they got to see where their parents had come from, because they're born in the United States, right? And there's always that with immigrants, the children of immigrants who are born here the stories are often really lost in that first generation because parents don't want to talk about them. It's too soon.
So they're closed-lipped about what happened.
Yeah, they're closed-lipped.
Yeah.
So this was a really interesting dialogue for these kids to open up with their parents and to see and it was very powerful for all the kids and their parents.
Have you taken the film back to the refugee camp and played it?
It's been playing in South Sudan. Film Aid has been playing it in various refugee camps there. It's been, had a very intense response. It played in Nairobi. I want to talk about our adult actors. Gare Dewani, he was in I Heart Huckabees. He plays Jeremiah, and he's also a model. He's beautiful, and he's on the United Nations High Council for Refugees now. And he lost his entire family in the war, except he just found his mother in a refugee camp after 18 years.
Wow.
So he's been
Is that
amazing.
This is the filmmaker. I mean, but did they get that on camera?
It's on camera. If you go,
awesome.
CNN has it on camera. They
Wow.
took him over there.
That's
So
great.
he was a child soldier. He was forced to be a child soldier. He was also a lost boy. So he's remarkable. He plays Jeremiah. And then Arnold Osang, he's the lead. He plays Mamer. And Arnold, his father was Sudanese and his mother's Ugandan, and he was kidnapped to be a child soldier as a baby. And his mother and auntie went into the jungle and kidnapped him back.
Wow.
And his father was murdered. And they got to London. And he was raised in London, and he became a child actor in London. He's really talented. He's an incredible actor. And he's up for some really big films from this. He's going to have a lovely career. I mean, he's really a born actor. That's what he's going to do. And for him, his mother never talked about Uganda and what they went through. And when Arnold came to Heathrow, and he was 3.5, maybe 4, they're not always sure their exact ages, and he couldn't say a word but tuk tuk tuk, which was the sound they used for gunfire.
Oh,
That was the only word he would say was tuk 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 tuk, because that was machine gun fire. So, and his mother never talked about, he never knew about his father, he never, any of it. So it sparked a conversation with him and his mom. So in doing interviews, he was very reluctant. He was like, I haven't been through what these other people I'm acting with have been through. And then, of course, he had a lot of buried memories, and he has been through a lot. But he's lucky he got out when he did. Then Emmanuel Jal, he's a famous musician in his own right. He was a child soldier and a lost boy. And then he was adopted by a warlord there, and his adopted mother was a woman named Emma, who, I'm forgetting her last name, there's a book about her, Emma's War. They were murdered. So he lost his parents, his adopted parents, was a child soldier for a very long time. And he lives in Toronto. He's a musician and gives speeches all over the world. He has TED Talks. He wrote a lot of the music in the film. He's pretty amazing.
Wow.
And then our lost girl is played by Kuth Wheel. And Kuth was born in a refugee camp in Ethiopia, and her father was a Sudanese doctor. He was murdered. She was forced to walk through the desert. She was lost for a long period of time from her parents. She was living in the refugee camp with her mother, and they discovered that her oldest brother had survived. She had never met him 10 years ago, and was a lost boy and had been sent to Minnesota. And so she and her mother were able to be sent to Minnesota. And she's actually had a real American education, and she was graduating from college when the casting call came out, and she was like, I don't know, I can't go do a movie, I have to finish my degree. And her college was like, listen, you have to go do this movie, and don't worry about it, we'll take care of it. And she auditioned on her iPhone in the library for The Lost Girl and did the scenes. She's incredible. She has a couple scenes with Reese Witherspoon where she's so good with she's such a natural actress. We call her, she is the Sudanese Audrey Hepburn. She's absolutely, which is interesting because Audrey Hepburn was a refugee of war herself.
Interesting.
And there's something, she's very much, and she looks like, if you were to create a Sudanese Audrey Hepburn,
It would be her.
It would be her. So, and then Corey Stoll is our other actor, who's an incredible actor. He was in House of Cards. He's got a lot of movies coming out right now. He's very hot, and he plays Jack, who runs the employment agency that he owns it and sort of has a couple pivotal scenes with them.
So, the movie's finished. You're enjoying the success of it and the effects it's having on people's lives, and hopefully, on the refugees in Sudan. What's next for you in terms of what are you going to what are you working on next? Are you in this same vein of trying to make a difference in the world, or are you?
Well,
do you get caught between actually, a career that you have to do stuff that, is, I don't know.
Well, it's
Like
pretty
a light comedy or something. I don't know.
I don't know. It's very hard because movies like this, it's very hard when you take on difficult subject matter.
Yeah.
You need to have the Coen brothers by your side. There's something in the world of movie criticism right now. It's very male. It's very like comic book. It's very like short-sighted, and I write a lot of male films. That's what I write, and but it's a very narrow bandwidth to be able to get attention, particularly from the film media themselves.
Tell us some of the male films that you've written.
Well, I have Warm Springs for HBO, which starred Ken Branagh, which is all about FDR and his polio, and that was 10 years ago. That was the spec script I got, how I got this job, and that won the Emmy for Best Movie, and it was on HBO. It was up for 16 Emmys, and it was a big. It's not playing the. HBO has a problem because they can't stream a lot of their movies because they have too many multiple rights, and we made the film right before streaming contracts were made. We have to go back and
figure out how to rework that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so it's because it's a really great film. And then I have I wrote for Boardwalk Empire, like I said, and then I have a movie with Brad Pitt. I have a lot of things that are in the hopper, getting ready to because it takes years to get a movie made right now. And so I have, and then I'm about to write a mini series for David O. Russell, the director for HBO. Actually, it's about the Kennedys, but it's about the Kennedys as they relate to Ireland. It's sort of an Irish Godfather. It's going to be a 4-hour piece that goes through 4 generations.
Well, you can take some notes when you're there next week.
I know. I'm going to meet. There's a lot of people there that I'm going to meet so I get to double up. And I've been at the Kennedy Museum, and it's pretty fascinating.
So, what are some of the writing that's on television today, or HBO networks, that type of thing, that you're not a part of, but that you admire in terms of you think is on track with what's a good trend?
Well, I love Veep, and I love Silicon Valley. I think those are 2 absolutely fantastic shows that are very different, but they're sort of taking comedy and pushing it to a new form, and they're very character driven. And their leads, I like that all the leads are a mess. No one's perfect. They're just like we are in that respect, and they have incredible dreams. And those are 2 of my absolute favorite shows. And I love Tina Fey's 30 Rock. I thought that was a perfect series and really grew. And in the hour genre, I like a lot of different things. Breaking Bad is obviously, for a writer, that character of Walter White, and to take him on a character arc that deep and that profound. And also, it's interesting, people don't realize, the whole series of Breaking Bad takes place in a very, a 14-month period. So you would go back every year and it'd be 5 minutes later where you'd pick up Walter White. So it had this compression of time and drove the character, and you got to get very deep into character without, we have to, network TV, it's always about time, and you're like, no, I want to do a show that the whole 5 years of a series takes place in 18 months. Then you really focus on character. And with Breaking Bad, you never felt like you were ever staying in the same place for a minute. I really like Peaky Blinders. I don't know if you've seen, that's shot in Ireland and England, and boy, it's a fabulous show. And I like Penny Dreadful on Showtime, John Logan's show.
I was surprised when I started watching Mad Men for the first time that most of the staff on that was female writers. It was for the first few seasons, it was almost all female writers.
And Matt has kind of continued with that through the whole series, and he works really well with women. He feels really comfortable with them, Part of what made Mad Men, I think, groundbreaking was that you did see the female point of view within that show so clearly.
Yeah.
Which is Matt. That's Matt's pilot, Matt Weiner. But he's there's no one like, he's a very special bird.
I noticed right off the bat, without even knowing who was writing it, the one thing that I liked about the show when I first started watching it was, even though you have the main character that is, addicted to women and that kind of thing because of his past or whatever, they never took those scenes too far. It was always very discreet the way they did it and filmed it, and it was a pleasure to watch a show that actually didn't go too far with stuff. It's like, oh, we can have a story without actually.
Well, and the reason it didn't is because it has commercials. If it had been on HBO, it would have gone too far.
Okay, maybe so.
So it's because the audience expects it, they're paying for it, and so these are things that as a writer you're like, I don't necessarily agree with some of the choices on HBO for the way they treat their female characters, but and I actually love what Matt did, because that restraint, sometimes when you have restraint either within your budget or because of its commercial network or the taste of the network, restraint is often like, when you see The Good Life, there's a tremendous amount of restraint with the violence, and a lot of people were afraid to see this violence, but you never see the violence. What you see is how the violence affects them.
Exactly.
And that's where you're really using your skills as a writer and a director. Philippe Falardeau directed The Good Lie with tremendous restraint. I think partially because he's French-Canadian and he doesn't need to see all of that. That's sort of part of where our films, American films, they need things explode and people fall apart. And I don't think that's how, there's a real male gaze on violence, certain violence. And so Philippe, we were very lucky that it was Philippe directing the film. Yeah.
Good. Well, I can't wait to see the film this evening, and good luck with everything. Your success with the film from this festival forward, and good luck with your future
projects. Thank you so much
and
for having it in the
Ireland.
festival. It's really, everyone involved with the film is really honored. This film festival has a great reputation out there in the world, and people really like it, so thank you.
Thanks. It's a pleasure.